Hey guys, and welcome to another weekly installment of I throw something random up on your screen and you watch it. But seriously, this week is a little random. I did a 5-minute microtalk for a local meetup of indie game devs, and I thought maybe you guys would dig seeing it. Maybe not. Afterwards, you can let me know, and I can do more or less of these, but since it's supposed to be in 5 minutes, let me get started. Paper prototypes and you, a brief reminder. So I say a brief reminder there because at this point in the talk, I would ask everybody in the room to raise their hand if they had done a paper prototype, and pretty much everyone would. And then I'd say that's why this isn't a talk about making paper prototypes, because you guys all know it. This is more of a talk about remembering that that is a tool in your game development toolkit, in your game designer toolkit, and I needed that reminder, so I thought maybe you guys would too. So some of you that may know this channel know I'm working on 3 prototypes currently. The first one here is Chess the Gathering, and this was a paper prototyping gimme. This game is basically a board game. It's a mashup of a board and a card game, and Holly and I painted some miniatures and glued some Legos on the bottom and had a blast. So that was kind of cheating in a way. I feel like that was an obvious candidate for paper prototyping. And our second prototype was an action game that had dexterity elements, and so that made no sense to paper prototype it, and we didn't, which made sense. And the final prototype, called Scavenger, was basically a real-time strategy game mixed with some tower defense and some dungeon crawling. It's kind of a strange game, but I didn't think of paper prototyping it because it had real-time elements, and it just didn't occur to me. And then I was talking to a friend who is neither a programmer nor an artist, but is interested in getting into game development. And he had an idea, a pretty good idea, for a game. And he was asking me about if he should learn Maya or Unity or hire people or how he should start this thing. And the thought occurred to me, well, why don't you paper prototype that? Because the game mechanics he was describing seemed very paper prototypable. And you could invite some friends over, play it, and then you'd get at the core of those mechanics and see if the game was fun, which I think is what was the most important thing to him, and probably is the most important thing. So after I got off the phone with him, I sat there and I thought, wait a minute, I could totally paper prototype Scavenger. Even though it's a real-time game, if I distill it to its core elements, I could make it turn-based, and I could simplify all the mechanics, and that way we could give it a shot. And we did that. Holly and I did that. We played through it, and I thought there was a lot of good things. There were a lot of advantages to paper prototyping that I had forgotten about. Now, I'm not saying there aren't disadvantages, but there are certain advantages for certain types of games. It's an easy way to see if an idea is half-baked. Sometimes when I'm designing a game with a notepad and pen and figuring out the mechanics, I just want to play it. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but a lot of times the idea is only half-baked. And so when you go to implement it, there's a lot of holes. And so when Holly and I were playing Scavenger, that came up quite readily, that I hadn't thought of certain cases, which is fine because we were able to adjust those rules and fill in those gaps as we were playing. So we might have suggestions or we might want to just try it out this way, and we could do that, which really leads into the second thing, which is rapid rule changes. I feel you're less precious, and I know at least I am, with the rules when you make a paper prototype. So sometimes people will suggest rules in the middle of a game, and with a paper prototype, you can just say, hey, let's start playing that way if you guys want. Or what happened at PAX East a bunch when we were playing Chess the Gathering is that someone would misinterpret the rules, maybe I didn't explain them well, or maybe they came to the game with a preconceived notion, and so they would start playing that way. And then I would sit there and say, hey, you know what, let's play this way and see how it pans out, because it might be an interesting insight. Which I feel that, you can't get necessarily when you do a digital prototype because those rules aren't as flexible as, erasing something and writing it down. So force simple, clean rules. Now, this isn't great for every game, but I feel most games can use simple, clean mechanics, and I feel that board games and paper prototypes enforce this, because if you sit there for half an hour droning on about all these rules to people sitting around a table, their eyes are going to glaze over, or they're going to stab you if you happen to have sharp pieces in the game, and nobody really wants that. So I think that it kind of forces that on you, which is a good thing. You can watch the player think and interact. There's a lot of kind of facial and gestural stuff that you can pick up on when somebody's playing. They might count out the spaces or move the piece and move it back, and you can I feel like you can kind of get, there's a physicality to their thought process sometimes that you can see. And it's not that you can't see these things or record the screen for a digital prototype or, watch their faces and their hands and stuff like that. I just feel that sometimes sitting around a table that it's a little easier to interpret. Seems less intrusive to playtesters. Now, this might be a me thing because I have a lot of indie dev friends that I throw my laptop in front of, and I'm like, oh, check out this new level and stuff all the time. So they might be more reticent around me. But I find that when I throw up a bunch of painted miniatures and some dice and some cards and throw it on a table, then it seems novel. And not only that, but then to non-gamers, it might seem a little bit less intimidating. And you can see here, 3 guys sitting around a table playing Chess the Gathering. Zero networking code here. All I did was throw down extra pieces in another printout of a board, and bam. Gets you off a computer. Now this, I think, is pretty big for Holly and I. We spend so much time in front of our computer that sometimes it's just invigorating to sit there with an X-Acto knife again and some pen and paper and construct some real things. I think that energy is required when you're developing games, and that passion, and it comes through. So I think that that's a good thing. And not only that, but I think it breaks you out of this mentality that we have with computers sometimes, where we're constrained by the tools that we have, and so sometimes we think within those constraints. So I think sometimes that if we bounce out of that. Now there are other constraints, of course, with the physical tools and paper and pen and stuff like that, but they're different, and so I think it just kind of flexes the mind. It also doesn't seem like you're working to your family. So if on a Sunday you really want to work on an idea, but you feel bad because you don't want your face buried underneath a monitor, you can go out on the dining room table and just start futzing around. The only problem with this is that your daughter may just think you're playing any random game and come up and just start playing along with you, which may not necessarily be a bad thing, because perhaps you should spend some time with your children now and again on a Sunday. So that's pretty much the idea. Let me know if you guys like this sort of thing and you want more, or if you don't at all. Thanks for being part of the experiment.